Now that we've explored the concept of way of being in relation to servant leadership and servant followership, let's think about the way of thinking. The way of thinking, again, is our philosophy or our belief about what it means to be a leader and what leaders do. Our way of thinking and our beliefs drive our way of acting. They also influence our way of being and kind of fundamentally underpin that. So it's really important that we understand and be intentional about the way of thinking because it subconsciously affects the way we lead in so many different ways. When we talk about philosophies of leadership, there are basically 5 different ways that we can think about leadership. And the most common of these is the characteristic. People think of leadership as a set of characteristics. So if you ask somebody to describe a leader, generally they'll start immediately listing characteristics. They're a person of integrity. They are outgoing. They are whatever. The second philosophy of leadership is the skill or behavioral philosophy. This looks at what leaders do and do well in terms of their abilities. So effective listening, communicating a vision, developing a strategy. These would be skills or behaviors. The relationship philosophy suggests that leadership is a relationship and describes the ideal relationship that exists between leaders and followers. Is that a friendly relationship? Is that a distant and professional relationship? Different people have different philosophies about what kind of relationship should exist between leaders and followers. The next one is positional. All leadership is positional. Many times people follow you because you have a position of influence, whether that is formal or informal. You may be the person in the group who's kind of the idea person that everybody just defers to because you have that relational role in the group. Or you may be the boss and people do what you say because you're the boss. This presents some challenges because individuals who are the boss never can be entirely certain if people are following them because of the quality of their leadership or because of their authority. Nonetheless, the way that we think of the positional role that we have has a tremendous level of influence, and the way that we maintain that role. So individuals have different philosophies about positional power. Some people believe that they really need to maintain a social distance and that their position is the reason others should respect and obey them. Others do not view positional power as being as substantial and therefore prefer to maintain more informal kind of authority and roles. So what is your philosophy in relation to positional power? And then finally, process. What kinds of processes do effective leaders use? Leadership can be thought of as a process, and oftentimes when we think of leadership as a process, somebody generates an idea, somebody communicates that idea as a vision, somebody develops a plan for completing that idea, somebody monitors progress. When we develop leadership as a process, it is much easier to begin to think of leadership as something that can be shared. I may be really good at generating the idea. You may be good at coming up with a plan. Another person may be really good at implementing and following through on the plan. And so we can think of leadership as procedural and therefore something that can be separated into parts that different people can play. Or one leader can enact the entire process. So that's 5 different. With those 5 different ways of thinking about leadership, then I want you to take a moment and I want you to ask yourself, what is your servant leadership philosophy? So take out a sheet of paper and I want you to write these down because you're going to put these into the assignment on this particular page in the class. So first of all, a servant leader is one who is this kind of person. So what kind of person is a servant leader? Make sure that they're characteristics, not skills, not things people do, but descriptions of the person themselves. So I want you to take a moment and do that. Feel free to pause the video so that you can write, and then when you're ready, hit continue. The second element is skills. And so in this one, I want you to think about what would a servant leader be able to do? What are the skills that a servant leader would demonstrate that may differentiate them from other kinds of leaders? Again, you can hit pause and then continue when you're ready. Position. How does a servant leader think about their positional power and maintain both formal and informal power? Relationship. How does a servant leader develop a relationship that is indicative of servant leadership? In other words, what kind of relationship do servant leaders have with their followers? And how might that be different from other leaders? Finally, process. A servant leader is one who influences others using processes that are what? How would you describe the processes that a servant leader would use to influence others? When you're done doing this, please complete the assignment on this page.